Progress.
Perfect. I'm Charlton McElwain here with Mark Weber, and we are speaking today with Derrick Brown. Derrick, can I get you to start off? Tell us your full name and where you're from.
All right, my full name is Derrick Spencer Brown, and I am from Ellery, South Carolina. It's Elloree. It's in the middle of South Carolina, about an hour from Charleston, an hour to the west of Charleston, and maybe 45 minutes to the east of Columbia, the capital city.
All right, so let's start there. Tell us a little bit about your family growing up in Ellery. What was your family life like? Who was around?
We grew up on a farm. It was like a cross between a farm and a homestead. My dad got an acre of land right in front of my grandmother's house, so that's where we lived. She lived behind us, and her oldest daughter lived behind her. My cousins lived across the street, so all of us lived in the same area on 80 acres in rural South Carolina. So we worked the land, we grew corn and vegetables, and we harvested, we farmed pigs, cows, chickens. We had it all, and that made life pretty simple, pretty quiet, and a little boring. So I developed a lot of imagination dreaming about where I wanted to be, especially on days where we had to work the fields, because you're going to be out there for a long time and sun's hot and you're thinking about where you would rather be. So that's where I learned how to dream, and that's probably become a great skill of mine, but it was honed out there in the fields.
And was part of your mom, your dad's aspirations for you that you would continue with that in some way, or certainly for the time being, it sounds like you had work responsibilities there.
Yeah, I think
But was there?
I think they wanted me to do something other than that life, and the work ethic that it instilled helped me in what I would eventually go on to do. But my mom was a teacher, and my mom was a teacher who went back to school after she had me. So I spent a lot of my early years in college with my mom, and that cultivated an interest in higher education because I was around it all the time. My aunt, my mom's older sister, was the director of career services at South Carolina State College. It's now South Carolina State University. But between the two of them, I was influenced to achieve and study and just know that my path would eventually include some form of higher education. Now, my dad was an electrical technician. In addition to being a farmer, he was a trained electrical technician. So he kind of taught me how to see and how to ask questions and investigate and how to fix things, how to value having things that work. And between my mom's influence and my dad's influence, I kind of became the combination of their talents and their influence.
And brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I had two sisters. I had an older sister who's about 2 years older than me. Her name is Tanya. Then I had a younger sister who's about 11 years younger than me. Her name is Tessa.
And so, tell me a little bit about what y'all did around the house. You talked a little bit about obviously out in the fields, out working during the day. When you weren't working, what were you doing? You and your sisters.
Well, I played with my older sister a lot, but then we kind of began to not get along very well, and our dad would kind of come up with jobs where she would be working in one part of the house, and then I would take care of most of what was going on outside, like cutting the grass, cutting wood, and trimming hedges, and anything you could think of that could be done outside. That was my job, to take care of all the animals. And once my baby sister came along, we were so much older than she was, and we kind of handled most of the chores, and she just got loved on a lot, a lot.
Mm. What'd you do for fun?
Played a lot of basketball. We had a pretty big yard, and I had a full court basketball court on dirt, but it was a full court, so a lot of the kids in the neighborhood would come to my house to play because I had the equipment and I had the space, and we had a good time. They would come by pretty much every day, and then when they weren't there, I had cousins across the street, and we'd ride bicycles. I had a little motorcycle when I was younger that I used to ride without a helmet. I used to fall off of it all the time and didn't think anything of it because I was always riding on dirt roads. Lots of dirt roads connected all the fields on the land that we had to the adjacent land. So we would just ride those dirt roads and discover rattlesnakes and raccoons. We got into all kinds of stuff, and it never fazed me because that's just what I saw every day. You see a snake, you just kind of avoid it and keep riding.
Keep on going.
Yeah.
Keep on going. So it sounds like, obviously in a small town, but sounds like a pretty tight knit community. You said you got other family there, cousins. Sounds like a place where everybody everybody.
Yeah, everybody knew everybody, and we all lived near each other. You're living near your entire family for the most part. My dad's family was very large. He was one of 9 children, and his family compound, if you will, was about 8 miles from my mom's family compound, so we always saw each other.
Gotcha. And what was, going back to your mom and dad, and you mentioned something about your aunt as well, and what were some of the key kind of things that they talked to you about, or principles they tried to instill in you at an early age? What were some of those values and so forth that were important to them that became important to you?
All of my elders were smart, and smart in different ways. I would say my Aunt Cynthia, my mom's oldest sister, and my mom Diane, and their baby sister Sheila, they were all very scholarly, very book smart. My great grandfather Henry Bonaparte was a very spiritual man who knew the land and knew the lay of the land. He was a very good singer, a very great storyteller. I just remember him telling me things. He would say some things over and over again, and he would quote the Bible, and he would quote song lyrics, and I just came to understand that anytime he said anything to me, it was kind of what I call a master class now. I would know he was saying things to me with a clarity and an urgency that meant I should probably listen. So I was with him for the first 25 years of my life. So if you have a great grandfather for 25 years, they're going to tell you a lot of stuff, because I think to them, time is of the essence, and they might be on the downward path of their lives, and they want to make sure that you get to your arc and your path the best way that they can get you there. I had my grandfather with me for about maybe the first 12 years of my life, but I think when I met him, he was older. He and my grandmother had separated for several years, and when he came back into our lives, he was very urgent about spending time with me and telling me things. And the storyteller that I am told that I am, a lot of that comes from remembering that there were some things that they told me over and over again. They would say things like, hey, don't mistake activity for achievement. And that's such a short statement. Even as a kid, you kind of understand, okay, they're saying just because you're doing something, that doesn't mean you're getting anything done. I wonder if they've seen something in the way that I work where they're kind of giving me a hint. So I used to wonder about stuff like that, but they would say it so many times, I came to understand this is just a truth. It's a maxim in their lives, and they're sharing it with me, and they're not sharing it with me in any snide way. They're just telling me there's some things you want to make sure you do, and there's some things you want to make sure you don't do, and you don't want to invest a lot of energy in doing a whole lot of nothing. Yes, that makes sense.
indeed. I can imagine being in Ellery, South Carolina. There must have been some racial politics around in your community, adjacent communities, things happen across the country, particularly when you got grandfathers and great grandfathers around that they communicated. What was some of that like for you?
Now, this is strange. I now know what went on in my community for the last 100 years. I know now. When I was younger, they said nothing about anything of the sort. I had to learn and learn on my own. Ellery was a hotbed of civil rights activity, white supremacy activity. My mother integrated the local school, the local high school, Ellery High School, did not accept black students until 1960. I want to say 68, and she was the first, and she volunteered to be the first. And when I came to learn all of this, I learned it all in 2015. That was the 50th anniversary of the first student being allowed into the Ellery public school system. And I think that student might have been in the 5th grade or something like that. But my mom said that she wanted to go to the integrated school simply because her training school did not have good books. They got the books from the public school, and those books were usually prepared and presented, if you get my drift. Now, they were marked with epithets, they were torn and ripped and shredded and then handed to the students at the training school. And she said that that was her chief motivation for volunteering for what would become a pretty harrowing experience that she told me about when I was of age. In 2015, I was 45 years old. So yeah, she told me about all of this when I was 45 years old, even down to the crosses being burned in her yard, inviting her to go back to the training school and to leave the public school. She told me about Julius Rosenwald and how he was the founder of Sears and Roebuck, and he built her school, and he built several schools all over the South. It was a lifetime of education that I didn't come to until I was a grown man, but it sticks, and it made me go back and read, and I was surprised at how much I found about my very small, teeny-weeny hometown and the presence of the White Citizens Council and what the farmers went through when the farmers joined the NAACP, what the teachers at the local schools went through when they joined the NAACP. Everybody was kind of put through the ringer, and several of the teachers were part of a pretty landmark case that the NAACP got involved in, the Legal Defense Fund, and helping them keep their jobs because they had been threatened with being fired because they had joined the NAACP. So there was a lot going on in Ellery, our small little town.
Mm. But it sounds like you all were shielded from that by your parents, and then you didn't particularly pick up on much of it. You just sort of just living your life.
Yeah. And I get it. If I had known, that might have been a lot to carry, and who knows how it might have impacted me now that I know the arc of my own life and some of the things that I went through. But now that I kind of know and understand all of it, I have an urgency myself now of I have a child now, and I know not to say everything to her about what I've experienced, but to use the art of storytelling to make her aware in a way that allows her to change what she can change and sustain everything else, and to kind of figure out which things she changes and which things she sustains. That's an art and a useful life skill, and you have to coach them into that the right way. And I think my folks tried to coach me into it the best way they can. That's what I'll do for my child, and I'm informed by the experience of how they brought me into knowing what I know now.
Yeah, yeah. So clear your mom, your whole family, education is a key value, especially hearing these stories about her own schooling experience, etc. So what was school like for you when you started to elementary school and started on up? What was your educational experience like?
School was an odd experience. That's the best way I can put it. I was schooled at home and schooled very well. My mother was a kindergarten teacher, so there's a lot that I knew by the time I showed up on day one at school. So a lot of days I'd be pulled away from the other kids. I'd be tested for every level of gifting that they could test me for. They discovered that I could read in kindergarten. So we would have flashcards. I didn't know what they were, but they would hold up pictures, and the pictures would have the word. Like I remember a picture of a ramp, and I didn't know what a ramp was, but I saw RAMP at the bottom of the card. So I told my teacher, "Hey, that's a ramp," and that earned me my first battery of tests where they had to figure out what was wrong with this child because you're not supposed to know all this stuff yet. And we're in a small town, so I don't think I'm any smarter than anybody else, any smarter than the next man. I have a level of experience though that might exceed some of my counterparts. And looking back, that was one of the most powerful lessons I would learn and continue to learn in my life when we see people stratified according to intelligence and abilities. You recognize even ability is something that's enhanced through experience. So maybe nobody's smarter or dumber than anybody else. Maybe everybody differs in their level of experience. So if you can bolster experience, you might be able to make anybody look smart.
Did you have any favorite teachers
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
growing up?
My first favorite teacher was Miss Parlor, Dorothy Parlor. That was my second grade teacher. And I loved her, and I was mortally afraid of her because she was so serious about learning. When you made mistakes, she had a ruler, maybe like an 18-inch ruler, and she would come and pop you on the knuckles if you didn't recognize the diacritical marks in the dictionary. She taught us how to use the dictionary. I'll never forget that. And she taught us parts of speech. She was hooked on phonics in 1977, and she taught us to read phonetically. She taught us to read and spell using that dictionary. And I don't think anybody else in my life outside of my mom taught me the way Miss Parlor did and got the best out of me. And she got the best out of me largely through fear. I was afraid to not do it the way that she showed us how to do it. And I think I flourished under her. And I think she recognized what my gifts were, and she recommended that they start accelerating me. So most of the time I was in second grade, I would spend in third grade classes, and then I was in third grade, they'd send me to fourth grade all day, and then I skipped a grade so that I could kind of get back on track. And I was small for my age, so once I skipped a grade, I was even smaller than everybody else, and that made me brave in a lot of ways, and that made me fearful in a lot of ways because I've always been a talker. And when I'm the smallest of the smallest, and I can speak like I'm the largest, that's going to get me into a lot of trouble. And over the years, I've learned to harness that. I can speak my piece, right? But I speak peace as well, and that keeps me out of the trouble that I used to get into when I was younger and smaller.
Yeah, it sounds like that teacher really had a big impact, particularly that the fear that you had of her that seemed to really, as you say, produce something that was enhancing for you. That
Yeah,
is your gift and an interest in words and writing and speaking and all those things that sound like came out of that
yeah,
particular class.
yeah. She has a daughter, Beverly, and Beverly now looks exactly like Miss Dorothy. So at this ceremony I mentioned a while ago, the anniversary of the integration of the schools, Beverly Parler came and spoke at that event, and she walked in while I was on stage because I had been asked to speak as well. And when she walked in, I forget what I was talking about, but I just stopped and I started talking about her mama because she looked just like her mama, just like
Wow. And there was if I'm recalling correctly, there was a moment fairly early on when you ended up in was it a writing contest? That was a statewide kind of event.
her. Yeah,
Tell
yeah,
us a little bit about that.
yeah. This would have been 1979. I'm in fifth grade in 1979, and South Carolina elected its first woman, female, to statewide office. Her name was Nancy Stevenson. She was elected lieutenant governor, and she had a keen interest in writing, so she sponsored writing contests across the state, and essay writing contests, expository writing. I didn't know what any of this stuff was until I read about the contests. And that year I had a teacher. Her name was Agnes Brandenburg, my fifth grade teacher. She was a wordsmith, so she told me that the word essay, she said it was a French word and that it meant to try. So she said expository writing is all about trying to explain or expose someone to new ideas. You're trying, you're making an earnest attempt to efficiently introduce somebody to an idea, a thought in a persuasive way. That's okay. I get that. I get that. I get that. So she asked me what I wanted to write about, and I said, well, if I get to choose, I want to write about baseball. I love baseball. So she said, okay, what are you going to try to explain? I said, okay, I'll try to explain why baseball is like the best sport of them all. And I don't think that anymore. I kind of think football is the greatest sport of them all. But when I was 9, I loved baseball, largely because of my grandfather. So I wrote an essay about how much I loved baseball. I won this contest, and I got to meet Nancy Stevenson, not at the state house. I think we went to our local county courthouse, and she introduced herself. She told me who she was as a person. She told me who she was historically, and all of that stuck with me. So I got the chance to be in that contest again in 1982. I'm in the 8th grade in 1982, and I win that contest again. So those two experiences kind of told me when I was young that of all the things that I'm able to do, it sounds like I'm pretty good at explaining and using the written word to explain. And then in later years, I come by this definition of writing as organized thought. So I said, okay, well, if you're able to write, that must mean I'm pretty good at thinking as well. That must mean I'm pretty organized. So now life is starting to take shape in my mind insofar as what I can do because I know my skills. And that experience, looking back on it, is a powerful experience to share with my child, as my child, who's in the 3rd grade now, starts to flourish and discover that she can do all kinds of things. I can kind of focus her and say, your skills are activities that come naturally to you, that come easily to you. You want to do them, and you will learn by studying your interests, and you will study some interests that become more interesting than others. Those will become your passions. Your passions will lead you to purpose. And once you discover why you're here, once you discover your why, you're going to be a pretty prominent person because you will pursue your why. And if you can discover that when you're young, you're going to live a very prominent life, whether that includes riches or not. You'll have the wealth of knowledge of who you are and what you're supposed to do while you're here. But yeah, all of that kind of grew out of that writing experience for me.
So 11, 12 years old, you're starting to become very clear about what you're good at, what your skills are. Did you have a sense at that time of what you thought you might want to be at that point?
Yeah, no, that's when I went on my own rabbit trail because I knew what I was good at, but my mind, my MO then was to translate the skills into some type of profession. We had this computer at our school in 1982. It was, I forget the fancy name for it. It was some type of online information system that allowed you to explore careers. So I would go to the library every chance I got and take the little survey, interest survey, and try to do the interest survey in different ways, provide different answers, and see what it told me I should be when I grew up. And I would always get careers like being a principal. I would get something at the time called system analyst, didn't know what that was. I would get systems engineer. I wanted to get something more specific in engineering, so I eventually learned how to answer the questions so that it said, hey, maybe you should focus on electrical engineering. And that then became my dream, maybe not for all the right reasons, but I said, okay, I've got this aptitude for math, this aptitude for writing, I've got an aptitude for organization, analysis. Yeah, I'm going to become an electrical engineer. Now, if you ask me today what I would want to be, I would say, you know what? I would have stuck with being a writer and I would have gone as far with that as I could. The reason why I didn't when I was 12 years old is I looked at how much writers made according to this online information system, and who knows where they got their information. But the information provided to me said, son, you're going to know a mighty struggle as a professional writer unless you're Ernest Hemingway. So I steered away from that and I steered towards something that looked like it was going to pay me some money. And I put my hand up and say, boy, yeah, I wish I hadn't done that. But I did. I did. I did.
Yep, sound like a natural path given the information provided. Um, so you mentioned going to the library, interacting with this computer to get the kind of information on careers you wanted. Was that your first experience with computers, or what followed that in terms of as you start looking at computers as a tool, very specifically, personally?
Yeah, I think 2 years before that, now this would have been 1980. I'm in sixth grade in 1980. My mom bought an Apple computer. I think it was the Apple IIe. And it was a day that will live in infamy because when she brought it home, she and my dad had an extended discussion about how much it cost. So I'm listening. So I hear it cost about $5,000. And I remember my dad saying, that's like buying a car. And then I found out that my mom had actually financed it. She was paying for that computer like she was buying a car, but she bought it because she wanted to learn how to use it. She wanted us to learn how to use it. And it was an Apple computer. So it catered to the wonderful user experience even back then. And I found it easy to use for the things I was able to do. It had a program called AppleWorks, and AppleWorks had a word processor, straightforward enough. Now, instead of me writing my essays and tracing them on lineless paper with my pen, I can type them. Okay, I like that. It had a database. Okay, I don't know what a database is, but I like to make organized lists of collections. I like to write down all the cassette tapes that I have. I like to write down all the books that I have. And then I find out, okay, well, that's what databases are, man. It's a collection of organized information, organized related information. That's what a database is. And then it had a spreadsheet, and it would be years before I actually understood what a spreadsheet was, but what it looked like was a combination of a calculator and a word processor. I can see that, so I can be that. I used AppleWorks all the time. It also had a compiler, some type of compiler. I don't know what it was called, where you could write code. And I tried that a couple of times, and I said, okay, this is Greek to me. I'm not sure I like this idea of writing code. I think I'm going to stick to AppleWorks. AppleWorks allows me to be productive and confident because I understand what it is. I can conceptualize what it is. I can tell somebody else what it is. This programming stuff, I'm not so sure about. So that was my introduction to computing. And then I kind of figured out nobody around us really had computers. Nobody at my school had computers except the school itself. And they were computers that we didn't really have access to. The only access I had to the career computer was through the librarian. The librarian would collect your interests on a sheet of paper. She would go and type everything into the computer, and she would bring you back the information that you are provided. Now, I look at experiences like that now, and I say, "Oh man, my librarian was the gatekeeper," and I, I like to remove gatekeepers wherever I find them. I didn't know that she was the gatekeeper back in those days, but I know how to recognize gatekeepers now.
Mm. And so what did you do knowing she's a gatekeeper keeping folks at bay or deciding who gets access and who doesn't? How did you use your access to the computer early on when your mom got you that Apple IIe? What did you build with it? You talked about some of the programs that you used. What was the next step in terms of that getting you towards, this is a way to create something or get you to express what you like to do, what your strengths are, some of those things?
Well, the first database I made was a career database. The reason why I would complete the survey in different ways was because I knew it would provide me different perspectives on career options, and I'd bring those sheets of paper home and I'd put them all in my little database. It wasn't a fancy database, but it allowed me to organize and aggregate everything that I was getting from the librarian as she handed it to me one sheet at a time. I kept all those sheets, came home and typed all that stuff in. And then one day I sat down and read it. I said, oh, I can actually see the collections, the related interests, how some of these interests all kind of aligned around math, science type things, like the system analysts, the system engineers. Oh, those are very related to engineering, and I would learn some years after that they were very related. But all of that, I was introduced to kind of analyzing and synthesizing all of that by just bringing it home and putting it in a database. And I was hooked after that. It's like databases this is I like this. I like this.
Mm. So at some point after that, this picture started to form around engineering, electrical engineering, computers that are in the mix. In the same way that that card and reading those words kind of got you on some people's maps as a kindergartner. It sounds like these kinds of things for you got you on the map to some other folks, particularly at Clemson University, who reached out, and there were some programs that you started as a high schooler, that was a result of this that helped to kind of then channel some of that. Can you tell us a little bit about?
Yeah, now Clemson has a summer program called the Clemson Career Workshop, and its aim and scope is very straightforward. You are brought to Clemson for 2 weeks to try college along with other people who would like to try college. You are all from rural areas of South Carolina, and you're the best and brightest at your respective school. You come together and you spend 2 weeks together for consecutive summers, and that turned into a magical and mystical experience that changed my life, especially being around other kids who were performing at a high level from other schools in areas as impoverished and as rural as the area I was from. And I now see that as a masterful way to recruit students. And I'm sure they saw some of that, but I don't think they could foresee the impact that that program had on me and a lot of folks who have been my classmates who are now my friends as we have all come back together and talked about and understood how powerful an experience that was and how that program is one you keep around forever. Now, it disappeared for a few years, but it's back and at full strength at Clemson now. But that gave me my introduction to college life. And in Clemson, I found, hey, this is an environment not that different from my home, but then it's different at the same time because of the people I'm able to be around. I think I might want to go to a school just like this. That was a powerful recruiting experience.
Mm. And so those 2 years, what were some of the things that you did as part of that program? What were some of the kind of the everyday
Well,
assignments and tasks and learning, that kind of thing?
yeah, we went to actual classes. I went to a digital logic class that was taught by Dr. John Como. And Dr. John Como would become my digital logics teacher during my sophomore year. And that's when it clicked. Oh, we were in actual classes when I was in 10th grade. He was introducing me to the AND gates and OR gates and the chips that these functions were executed on. And he introduced us to all of that when we were in high school. We took a public speaking course, and that's when I realized I had the gift of gab, but I was in a shell and I was terrified to be in front of certain groups of people. Now, who are these people? I think I'm terrified to say anything in front of females. Yeah, I'm not great when I'm in front of an audience and I see females in the audience. I got to discover and confront stuff like that when I was in high school. We had a computer science class, and as much as I knew about databases and spreadsheets and word processing, in that computer science class, we're focused on algorithms and coding. And I'm not sure I know much about coding. I knew more about algorithms than I thought. But when I took the test at the end of that computer science class, I didn't do well at all. And that got me shaky because I said, well, I want to be an engineer. And engineers certainly use computers. I'm not sure I'd ever try to be a computer engineer or computer scientist. They seem to be a little deep off into this thing. I want to kind of stay away from that. But still, you got to see it all before entering the hallowed halls and moving towards matriculation. You got to see it and you got to make informed decisions about what you saw. The most informed decisions you might be able to make when you're 15 or 16 years old. And that's
Indeed. So how did you then get to Clemson? Obviously, you end up as an undergraduate. Did you consider other places to go? Had you made up your mind that engineering was the way to go? What was the lead in that got you to Clemson?
I was on an engineering track all 4 years I was in high school, and the only other school that I seriously considered was Georgia Tech. So I went to Georgia Tech on its National Merit Scholar Weekend. I was a National Achievement Scholar, but they also invited me to National Merit Weekend. So I got to rub shoulders with all the National Merit semifinalists who had shown up for the weekend, and we all went to a chemistry class, and that chemistry class was taught via video. So I sat in that class and saw more people than I had ever seen in one room in my life and tried to imagine taking notes from a professor who was coming to me via video, and it freaked me out. That experience told me, man, we're not going to Georgia Tech. At Clemson, it's a little more hands-on, and I see people. I don't see video. Now, I know better now, but in 1986, that told me, do not go here, go here. And that's how I picked Clemson over Georgia Tech. That's not scientific, but that's how I picked my school.
Mm. Yeah, I had a sense of wanting to engage with real people instructors, etc.
Yeah. Now I went to Georgia Tech for grad school, man, and I fell in love with the video professor in grad school because that gives you an opportunity to go to class, get confused, go grab that tape, watch the whole thing again for the first time. That was my ace in the hole in grad school. So that's again the value of experience. I didn't know what I was seeing in 1986, but then when I got there for grad school in 1992, I said, okay, give this a second look because this is going to get you through grad school.
Yeah, you were ready for it by that point. So let's talk a little bit about Clemson. What was it like for you as a student, particularly those first couple of years as you're getting your footing, you're figuring out what this this place is all about, what you're doing, who your professors are, what classes are like. What was your early experience at Clemson like?
Well, I was accepted into the honors college. It was called the Calhoun Honors College, and that allowed me to live in a dorm that was on top of a big hill. And the dorm was called the Clemson House, and that was where you wanted to be if you were a student who was focused on high academic achievement. And I might have been one of 3 African American students in that dorm. There might have been maybe 300 students in the honors college who lived in the dorm. And that became a very isolating experience. I mean, it's isolating by definition. You're living up on a big hill and you're looking down at everyone else. And the metaphor there kind of sticks once they find out you're an honor student. People kind of back away from you and say, oh, you're one of those smart people. So that isolated me from the African American community at Clemson. It isolated me from the majority community, the white students. There was a lot of isolation there, a lot of isolation even in the engineering community, and you have to learn how to process all of that at a young age where you kind of don't understand a lot of it and still achieve. So college made me grow in a lot of ways. It made me withdraw in a lot of ways, and a lot of what I saw kind of harken back to themes that I learned when I was young. Are people really smarter than other people, or do people differ in levels of experience? And if you can bolster levels of experience, can you make people smarter? And the answer to all of that to me now is yes, but I got to figure things like that out at Clemson, along with Thevenin's equivalent circuits and Kirchhoff's law and all the other stuff that we did in engineering that I still remember, but it's not as important as what I just mentioned about bolstering levels of experience, because that's carried me into what I do now.
And did you have a role there in obviously getting your education where it needed to be, but helping other students through kind of those challenges around the imposter syndrome, or just getting a handle on the work in particular classes?
Yeah.
What was your role in vis-a-vis your classmates?
It's funny. In college, students view and judge other students based on GPA and little else. So if you look at my GPA, I'm what you would call a 3.5. You're measuring me on the GPA Richter scale. I'm a 3.5 on the Richter scale. I'm not a 4.0. I'm not a 3.0. I'm somewhere in between. Now, if you ask me who I am and what my strengths are I'm not afraid of what I don't know. And my other strength is I'm able to articulate what I don't know and identify and research the resolution of my ignorance. So that made me an effective tutor to a lot of people, and that became noticed by a lot of people. So I was hired as a tutor we had an engineering enrichment and retention program. It was called PEER, Program for Engineering Enrichment and Retention. It was started my freshman year in 1987, and I became a tutor for the program in 1990. 1990 would have been my third year at Clemson, that's when I'm getting into my major classes, the very difficult classes. So being in the tutor role gave me the chance to help a lot of students, but now I will say in all candor, and I won't stop the tape for this one now, it also made me a hindrance to a lot of students. And I don't want to over explain that, but there were a lot of students that I knew kind of depended on me and depended on me way too much. And you may even remember this story, Charlton. I told you Dr. Snellsire, one of my favorite professors, gave me a key to his office so I could study. And I'm not sure whether I told the story to you this way, but he gave me that key so I could hide, so that when I had to do my work, nobody would be able to find me and ask me to do their work, because a lot of that went on, and it took me some years to kind of open my mouth and talk about it. I certainly wasn't talking about it much in 2015, but you made me think about it a lot, to the point where I said, yeah, somebody might be helped by me saying, yeah, I was in a strange position there because I helped a lot of people and I think I hindered a lot of people. And I've got to figure out how to not be such a hindrance while appearing to be a help, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that sounds like Dr. Snellsire helped you kind of navigate that difficulty by giving you the key to the office, knowing what it took to get through that and to succeed. And in some ways, look out for everybody else, but make sure you're looking out for yourself first and foremost,
Yeah.
and get on the path to where you needed to be.
Yeah. And the other big thing about being in his office was I had access to his library, and he's an electrical engineering professor. So he's got all the books that I would have to go and dig through our library to find. He's got them all right here on this shelf, alphabetized by disciplines and sub-disciplines, and I've got access to them. And I share that access with my fellow students once I emerge from this cave and I've come back with the tablets bearing all of the knowledge that we all need. And for those who want to partake of it in the legitimate way, I say, hey man, this is hard to do without appropriate partnerships where you and I are collectively tackling and resolving our ignorance. I don't want to study with folks that are just kind of sitting back and saying, hey, what'd you come up with? Because we had a lot of that.
Mm, mm. So what year did then you graduate from Clemson?
Graduated in December 1991. So that means I got to enjoy an additional football season. I got 5 football seasons because it took me 4.5 years to graduate. And that was all planned, even though our team didn't do as well as we would have liked for them to do back in those years. I did get to enjoy that 5th season, and I got to enjoy a last semester where I think I took a class in nonverbal communication. I took a class in philosophy. I relaxed that last semester to get ready for what would come next and start that process of kind of rounding myself into form, because I have not engaged much in writing at all at Clemson. I've been all engineering, all math, science, technology, and I'm now a hardcore techie. But now at my core, I'm still a writer. I'm just not stirring up that gift and nurturing it the way I should have been.
Gotcha. So you're wrapping up. You're about to graduate. What was on the horizon for you? What did you imagine was coming next in terms of work or school? What were you looking to get into?
Well, one of the many great things about the program for engineering enrichment and retention is you are mentored and guided by some people who have been there to always be looking at what you're going to do next. So I think my senior year, I got a graduate fellowship that would allow me to intern with a company who would be my sponsor, and then return to that company for each summer that I would be in grad school. And I got picked up by a company called the MITRE Corporation. And I'm a wordsmith, so I look up MITRE, and to MITRE means to fit together. They're a systems engineering firm. So I said, look at this. I have ended up working for a systems engineering firm. Even though my school doesn't have this major, I'll get to see what systems engineering looks like as opposed to the electrical engineering that I have practiced, because there's lots of electrical engineers there. There are lots of bioengineering folks there. There are lots of coders there, and they're all working on all these different government projects. There are defense contractors, and they do federally funded research and development. Now I get to see what all of that looks like, and I did, and it helped me understand what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do, which gave me a great focus in grad school. And it was such a powerful focus. I would tell anybody, yeah, of all the fellowships you can get, this one was called the GEM Fellowship, and I think GEM stands for Graduate Degrees for Minorities in Engineering, something like that. They're still around, but that is a powerful experience to be able to work on the put into practice the things that you are studying while you are still in school, because that informs class choices and professors that you might want to interact with, either directly with them as your instructor, or you might want to do a project for them. It just gave me a lot of guidance and a lot of savvy that paid off for me.
Before moving too much forward, I did want to ask, so in Charlton's book, he talked about, I think at Clemson, you're already using email, you were online, and you were DJing, and people could only find the way to the party through email or something. Like, talk about your online experience, and also, I couldn't quite understand that. So you're still up on the hill in Clemson, but you're also DJing and kind of the center of that scene. So
yeah. The DJing happened at Georgia Tech. That wasn't until
so I'm mixing it up.
Yeah,
okay.
That wasn't until I got to Georgia Tech. At Clemson, I was all about those books, all about the books. And then when I made the choice for grad school, I actually made a social choice for grad school. I realized that the isolation I experienced at Clemson, I could kind of undo if I chose a grad school that would at least let me be around a lot of people who look like me, who was also trying to do what I was trying to do. And that made Georgia Tech the logical choice for grad school, the same way it wasn't the right choice as my undergraduate school. It was the absolute right choice for grad school, because when I went on grad school recruitment weekend, I saw a lot of African American students from all over the country who all said, why wouldn't you go to grad school in Atlanta? Why wouldn't you? So we all did. Yeah. And now,
And you were
go ahead.
But did you go online at Georgia Tech?
Yeah. I went online at Georgia Tech. This would have happened.
I'll let you tell it in order. But.
Yeah, it started in 1993. I saw all of the tools available at Clemson, and I used them sparingly. I saw them as requiring time I didn't really have. I spent most of my time in the Macintosh computer lab, working on spreadsheets for lab reports and stuff like that. And I would see everybody on the digital machines and the Sun computers, and would wonder what they were doing, and would say, okay, I'll save that for grad school. So when I got to grad school, I made a lot of friends just by going to the computer lab and sitting next to people who looked like they were doing neat stuff. So that's how I learned about Lynx, which was a text-based web browser from way back when, and how to access sites like Yahoo using the Lynx text-based browser and still being able to extract a lot of useful information from it. And then in 1994, this is early in 1994, I went and sat by a brother by the name of Jerry Volsey. I remember Jerry because Jerry's brother, Franz Volsey, played for Seton Hall, played basketball for Seton Hall. And I remembered seeing Franz Volsey on TV when Seton Hall went on a nice run in the NCAA basketball tournament, March Madness. But Jerry was on the internet in something that operated like Lynx, but it had graphics and color, and it just looked like a very different user experience. So I asked him what that was, and he said, well, this is called Netscape. This is an internet browser like links, but it's like links to the 50th power. So, okay, I think I get what you're saying there. This is a very useful tool. It's a graphical interface to the internet. Man, it's going to make it a lot easier to get to all of this information. So I say, so how can I get this at home? And he said, well, there are a lot of people who know how to do it. There are a lot of people who don't know how to do it. I am one of the people who don't know how to do it. This is what Jared's saying. This is why I come to the computer lab to use it. But somebody around here knows how to use it. So that put me on a quest to find these people. And I found them and asked them, hey, how do you set this up? So they show me how to set it up. And it's kind of technical, a little involved. So I asked them, like the systems engineer that I don't know that I am, but I really am. I say, how can you streamline these scripts? How can you turn it into something that's almost like an installation disk that I could pop into the computer on a floppy, make several copies, double click a file, and just have all of it happen? And they said, well, we don't know. That's something you can help us do. So we got together and did that as a project that became a fundraiser for the organization I was involved in at Georgia Tech, the Black Graduate Student Association. We put together a floppy diskette that would install all of the scripts that you needed to access the internet and use Netscape from home on your 14.4 kilobaud modem. And that I set sail after that. It's like this is significant. This has been invented in my lifetime. This is like I don't know who was around when Henry Ford invented his car or whatever. This is like watching the car be invented or watching a hammer be invented. This is big stuff.
And so,
Charlton, I broke the chronology. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
yeah, no problem. We're there. All
right.
I'm gonna back up just a little bit, but kind of stay where you were. You're at a point. You're at Georgia Tech. You're getting a master's in what at Georgia Tech?
Electrical engineering.
Also electrical engineering. Okay. And so you're there, and you've just talked about kind of being at that nexus where you can see what's happening. You can see a little bit of the future. You have an opportunity to help other people understand and plug into that. What was you brought up the Black Graduate Student Association. Let's talk about a little bit about that. How did you end up as part of that group? What was that group in terms of who was there, who were its members, and what significance did that have in terms of you helping to kind of shape where you wanted to kind of plug in terms of some of these new tools that were on the horizon?
All right. Well, we had a community of over 300 African American grad students at Georgia Tech, and that was a situation that I don't think existed anywhere else in the country. That large a mass of students of color, and the organization that brought us all together, the Black Grad Student Association. I got involved in that when I first got to Georgia Tech, and the experience of putting that little disc together to get you onto the internet prompted me to create the Information Resources and Technology Committee. We had this fancy long name, and we just shortened it to Infocom, and I sold it at a meeting as, hey, if you know how to do anything with this internet or anything around accessing information, this is the place to be. So I had a committee. Charlton, I sent the list to you of the folks who were on that first committee, and I didn't realize who I had on that committee. I had some heavy hitting texters, a lot of software engineers, a lot of information architects, a lot of database designers. I attracted all of the folks that had the computer science background and deep skill set that I didn't have. But as the generalist in the group, I knew how to bring all of it together, make it fit together, and make it work. And we got some We got some good stuff done. Most of it was in the name of training, getting people onto the internet, helping them learn how to use Unix. As convoluted and as complicated as Unix is as an operating system, it is equally powerful when it comes to managing and manipulating information. So there's some stuff you have to learn about Unix. So I would teach the Unix classes as someone who understood enough about it to get you introduced to it, and then I can introduce you to the heavy hitters who can take you deeper if you have to go deeper. And a lot of the examples that I would use in my classes would be problems that I actually solved either in my research or management tasks for the Grad Student Association. We used to maintain a large email directory of all the students of color at Tech, and this is how we would let them know what was going on when I was having a party and we were frying fish and I would DJ the party. I can type that up in an email, send it to those 300 people, and 50 or 60 of them are going to come to our large 3-bedroom apartment out on Beaufort Highway, and we're going to have a great time. And that was all facilitated by email. Imagine if I'm printing invitations and licking stamps as a graduate student. That's not going to happen, but I'm using Elm. That was the mail reader that we used, Elm. I'm using Elm to send one message to a list of 300 people that I have carefully built using Unix commands like grep and awk to make this nice clean list where I send to everybody, and I might get 2 or 3 messages that bounce back, but that's not like a 20-cent stamp wasted. I don't waste anything but bandwidth in these bounce backs, but people get the word. People respond and let you know that they're coming. Now I know how much fish to buy. Now I know which songs to play. I can send out an email and say, here's the playlist, add your favorite song. Now everybody's gonna have a great time because I'm gonna play their favorite song. I might play it when they walk in. And all of that is being driven by these technologies and our ability to harness and use them.
And I would imagine people start to see the utility in all of those things in this kind of social environment, the ability to know where the party is, know what kind of party you're going to get all through this new tool. And so was this a way not only kind of to help facilitate the party, but really to get them thinking about what these new tools could be like if they adopted and used and pushed for them?
Oh, no doubt. Now I am subtly doing marketing and community outreach to people who have the ability to introduce and usher other people into the use of these technologies. And these people who have these abilities are almost as afraid as the people that I eventually want them to help. So I've got to help them get over that fear first so that they can then go and help somebody else, because this is new and this is hot. And I get it. As a student of history, you don't take advantage of this, somebody's going to become the gatekeeper for all of this stuff if you don't run in and grab the gold before they section off those hills. You got to go in there and grab that gold.
Mm-hmm. So you're serving as the facilitator, the organizer, the coordinator for all these folks who have differential expertise. How did that then channel into early on what became the kind of concept that ultimately birthed the Universal Black Pages?
All right. I realized the power that I had on that committee, and then I realized the agency that I had being the head of the committee. That ushered me into becoming the president. But somewhere between the fish fries and the playlists and all the email, I was well known. As shy as I was well known because of what I did. So when I became the president, in my inaugural address, I said, we're about to become a wired and crunk organization. This is what we're going to do. And those 2 words were powerful in the mid-90s. Wired is inviting you to something that a lot of people are scared of, but crunk, that's where everybody wants to be. That's hip and cool. So wired and crunk, those 2 words are very intentional in using them together. We're going to be both. You'll never get a paper invitation to anything I'm having in my house. It's always going to be email. And I'm going to email you the directions, even though you still have to print them out. You don't have GPSs on your phone and stuff like that yet. You will have to print them out and read them. But I'm going to tell you how to print them out using campus resources, where you can just go by and pick up the printout at the Office of Information Technology if you don't have your own printer. We're full service in getting people to buy in to what this stuff is, because as technologists, we've got to know how to use and leverage this, not just in support of our engineering and computer science disciplines, but in the name of building community outside of the hallowed halls of Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is legendary for being in Atlanta, but not necessarily being of Atlanta. It's kind of disconnected from the city of Atlanta, but this is a way we can bridge those gaps even between all the other schools in Atlanta, and that's what we set out to do.
And so you've got then this committee. It's got some different folks on it, different personalities, etc. How then the kernel of trying to connect not only what was happening within Georgia Tech and the BGSA, when did that vision start to turn outward, and the idea of being able to connect people beyond Georgia Tech, even beyond Georgia, across this new thing that was called the internet?
Well, I think everybody knew that my interest was like grassroots community building type stuff, using the tools. And some of the other guys on the committee were programmers and focused on building content. So they would tell me their ideas in their committee reports, and one day it comes across my desk that they're putting together this list of African related internet resources. And I use my imagination and I say, like Yahoo. This is a niched Yahoo. Yeah, it's a niched Yahoo. Okay. All right. So it's a directory. Am I able to search? And they say, well, yeah, you're able to search. Here's how you write a search engine. So they showed me a search engine written in a scripting language called Perl. And I can't code, but I can read code. So I read it and I say, wow, this is, I won't say it's simple because I can't write it, but it's easy to understand, easy to digest. Can you aggregate all the searches that people do over a period of time and then maybe analyze them in a database format? Yeah, you can do stuff like that. Okay, we should do that. Hey, that's a good idea. I know that's why I'm the systems guy, man. I'm like figuring out ways to leverage this stuff, to simplify it, and to kind of make it universal and make it applicable and useful to lots of folks. So that's how we figured out we have a search engine just like, I'm trying to remember the other search engines at that time, InfoSeek, Alta Vista, and I guess Yahoo technically was a search engine. So we're like, we can build the same type of thing that they're building. And then I asked one of them one day, I said, doesn't it seem like this stuff is way more complicated? Doesn't it seem like a search engine should be like 1,000,000 lines of code? And they say, no, it's not though. I said, no, I'm not saying whether it is or not. I'm saying, doesn't it seem like this is something really hard to do? So then they catch my drift. They say, yeah, that seems like it's something really hard to do. I said, well, then these are probably the types of ideas and technologies that you commercialize. You can commercialize this, man, because your search engine wouldn't be exactly like Yahoo's because you wrote yours and they wrote theirs. You can make yours faster. You can distinguish yours from theirs in many ways. You've already distinguished that you're trying to capture African related content, which I gravitate towards naturally because now you're going and trying to build the type of community we're trying to build through fish fries here on the ground. You're trying to build these same types of communities online. Man, that's awesome. that is awesome. That is awesome. So I say go, y'all, keep going and do as much with this as you can. We don't have a lot of money, but the money we do have, I'm the president. I'll put money behind whatever it is that you're doing. And if I can't put the money behind it, I'll go and find the money. So as they come up with ideas, I champion and market the ideas. There's a group of professors of color at Georgia Tech who were all very important, heavy hitting kinds of folks in their own right. They co-signed and underwrote a lot of what was going on, and I would be having the meetings with them to tell them what we were doing and the kinds of support that we needed. And in 1994, I don't know that a professor is as powerful as I know professors are now. Maybe all I saw a professor as was the person who keeps writing these really hard tests that I cannot complete in a reasonable amount of time. But they've got a lot more going on than that. They've got a keen eye towards commercializing research. And that's going to make them very helpful to us outside of our classroom experiences. So we've got to get to know these folks and we've got to leverage them. We've got to get them to get behind what we're doing. So just the vision of seeing all of that possible in this environment that I'm in, I don't know if anybody else is seeing it or not, but I know I saw it. So I said, okay, then we've got to push this forward. And that's how we got momentum. And that momentum eventually became the Universal Black Pages, an African directory of it's a directory of African related internet content.
And so
you need
go ahead.
to do something with, you said 45-minute intervals?
Yeah, I didn't want to stop, but this might be a good stopping point.
Just that I don't know what exactly we were doing.
Yeah, well, once I hit stop, this is the equivalent of rendering, like what we used to do with video in the old days. It'll render and compress, and then I'll be ready to hit another clip.
But Tron, does that do you any good to stop now for a little bit?
Yep, it's a good place to pause, and then I'll be here. You let us know when we're ready, and we'll get rolling again.
Okay, well I'll go ahead and hit stop.